My name is Mariah Bennett. I'm 29 years old, an elementary school teacher in Denver. 6 weeks ago, I walked down the aisle in a gorgeous white dress, believing I had found lifelong happiness. But on our wedding night, when I gently reached for my husband, he turned his back coldly and said the words that made my heart explode. "Don't touch me and don't expect anything from me." 6 weeks of marriage, he never once held my hand, never kissed me, never got close. The man who once proposed to me in front of hundreds of people had now become a stranger right inside our bridal suite. Can you believe a so-called dream marriage could begin with such cruel rejection? If it were you, would you keep enduring it, or start uncovering the truth? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so I can share the rest of this journey with you. Our wedding took place in Colorado Springs, in a setting any girl would dream of. Crystal chandeliers sparkled. Violins played through the elegant hall of the Highlands Country Club. I remember every detail of my father walking me down the red carpet, guests rising to applaud, their eyes shimmering with emotion. I truly believe that was the first day of a lifetime of happiness. Ethan smiled softly, his green eyes full of sincerity. He made his vows in front of hundreds of guests. "I will love you for life, Mariah. You're my everything." I believed in the image of a romantic, thoughtful man. The same man who once held my hand in Washington Park on a chilly autumn afternoon, handed me a bouquet of red roses, and said that one day we would build a little family behind a white picket fence. Throughout our 8 months of dating, Ethan always knew how to sweep me off my feet. He planned surprise picnics, left handwritten notes in my desk drawer, took me to small, cozy diners instead of fancy restaurants just to show that love didn't need to be showy. My friends used to tease me that I had struck gold, and my parents were pleased because Ethan seemed to check every box of the ideal husband: successful, mature, and caring. But all of it felt like a performance that lasted only until the end of our honeymoon. We went to Aspen, his choice, with the promise that he would give me storybook first days of marriage. I pictured sunny mornings, warm nights by the fireplace, and long, loving embraces. But in reality, Ethan constantly complained about being tired, used work as an excuse, and spent most of his time scrolling on his phone in the hotel room. When I came closer, he frowned like my presence was a burden. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe he was under work pressure, maybe he just needed time to adjust. But a whole week passed. Every night was cold, every morning was full of avoidance. I began to feel an invisible wall between us, thick enough to suffocate. When we returned to Denver, that wall didn't shrink. It widened into an unfixable crack. In the new house we had bought, the one I had imagined would be filled with laughter, all that remained was silence and dim light. Ethan followed a robotic routine that scared me. He woke up exactly at 6 a.m., ate breakfast in 10 minutes, skimmed a few news articles, then left. In the evenings, he sat at his computer for hours, typed a few lines, and then quickly closed it. I had never seen a single real document, nor heard the name of a single client or colleague. One night, I tried to start a conversation. "Ethan, how was work today?" He didn't look up, eyes still glued to the screen. "Just the usual. Difficult clients. Lots to do." I held back a sigh and forced a small smile to keep the mood light. "I still haven't met anyone from your company. When will you introduce me?" This time he turned to me, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "You know my financial work requires confidentiality. Not everyone can be introduced. You should respect that." He used to be eager to share every little thing, from choosing his lunch order to a coworker spilling coffee. Now, confidentiality had become the perfect excuse to cover up every blank space. I started paying closer attention. In his phone contacts, besides a few familiar numbers, there were strange ones labeled vaguely, Client 1, C, or just a string of digits. Whenever a call came in, he stepped out to the balcony or into the garage, always shutting the door tight. When he returned, his face looked blank, as if nothing had happened. One night, I tried to gently sit beside him on the sofa while his phone was next to him. I placed my hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Ethan, I remember when we first dated. You said that holding hands alone was enough to feel happy. Now even that feels like a luxury. Why?" He frowned and brushed my hand away instinctively. "Mariah, I told you already. Don't pressure me." My parents often called and asked, "How are you doing? Is Ethan taking good care of you?" I didn't have the courage to tell them the truth. I mumbled something about him being busy, that we were still adjusting to married life. Friends texted asking when we would throw a small gathering. I lied that we were both exhausted and needed rest. Little by little, lies became the mask I had to wear to save face. But inside I felt like I was being crushed. Once I stepped into his private office. Everything was unnaturally neat, so orderly it was unsettling. Not a single stray paper. No personal photos. No trace of actual work. The drawers held only a few pens, blank paper, and a laptop that was always locked. I felt like I was living with a shadow, not a real person. My unease grew even deeper when I realized he didn't seem to have any friends. No one called to congratulate him after the wedding. No coworkers sent flowers or gifts. Every time I asked, "Aren't you going to invite a close friend over sometime?" he replied flatly, "Friends are a distraction." The man who once overflowed with warmth and promises of a cozy family had now turned into a cold mystery living in a shell. I started to wonder, had I married someone who never really existed? Since returning from the honeymoon, I gradually noticed Ethan often disappeared without explanation. At first, I forced myself to believe he was truly busy with financial consulting. But over time, the so-called client meetings became suspiciously frequent. On some weekend afternoons, he would grab his car keys and leave, saying curtly, "I have to meet an important client. I might be back late." When I asked, "Which client? Do you want me to come with you?" he hesitated for a second, then frowned. "Mariah, this is work. You don't need to get involved." That sentence sank my heart. Aren't spouses supposed to share things? He used to tell me about a late lunch with a coworker in full detail. Now every question I asked was brushed off. On the nights Ethan was out, I lay in the living room watching the clock crawl toward midnight, my chest tight with worry. The sound of the doorbell, the echo of his footsteps coming back. All of it happened far too late for any client meeting. His eyes when he walked in held nothing but coldness and haste. "You're still up. I was worried about you. Why didn't you come home earlier?" He took off his coat, hung it on the rack, and replied bluntly, "Work isn't always on schedule. You should get used to that." Then he headed straight into the bathroom, leaving me frozen on the sofa. Another morning, as Ethan was getting ready to leave, I gathered all my courage and suggested, "Ethan, I think we should see a marriage counselor. It seems like we're going wrong somewhere." He spun around, his face briefly changing. In that split second, I caught a panic he couldn't hide. But a moment later, it vanished, replaced by a forced anger. "We don't need counseling," he replied firmly. "We need time. You're blowing this out of proportion." I tried to keep my voice steady. 6 weeks is enough to know something's wrong. We live in the same house, but I feel like a passerby. He clenched the handle of his briefcase, tension flashing in his eyes. "I already told you. No counseling. You have to trust me." He strode out the door, leaving me standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold on the table. I trembled, a vague fear growing inside me. The man I married wasn't the man I had loved. In the days that followed, I began to watch Ethan's every move more closely. He stared at his phone as if the whole world lived inside it. At dinner, instead of talking to me, he kept scrolling. Once I deliberately asked, "Who is it, Ethan? You've been texting all evening." He flinched, then moved the phone away. "A client." "Don't be so nosy." But the flicker in his eyes said something else. It was a secrecy that couldn't be concealed. Late one evening, he said there was an urgent meeting with a big client. I looked at the clock. It was already past 9 p.m. I tried asking, "A meeting at this hour?" He hesitated for a beat, then forced a smile. "Not everyone's free during the day. Sometimes you follow their schedule." I started confiding in my sister Claire. I called her, my voice choked. "Claire, I don't know who I married anymore. Are you sure he's being honest with you?" I bit my lip and answered softly, "I'm not sure of anything." Claire sighed. "You once told me Ethan was the perfect man. But Mariah, sometimes what looks too perfect is hiding something. You need to be careful." Her words echoed in my head. I decided to test it. When Ethan said he was going to meet a client, I quietly grabbed my coat and drove after him from a distance. My heart pounded when I saw he didn't head to an office or any financial district, but stopped at a small cafe in the suburbs. He sat there for nearly an hour. No clients came. It was just him, his phone, and a few sheets of doodles that he eventually crumpled and tossed into the trash. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. The lie was right in front of me. Yet he came home as if nothing had happened, even pretending to be tired so I wouldn't ask more questions. From that day forward, I knew for certain I was living with a man hiding secrets. The lying didn't stop there. Once, while doing the laundry, I found a hotel card in the pocket of his coat. It had the name of a hotel in downtown Denver, with a date matching the day he said he was meeting an out-of-state client. I held the card, my heart racing, my chest feeling crushed. When he got home, I tried probing. "Ethan, that day you went to Salt Lake City, right?" "Yeah." "Why?" I clenched the card in my coat pocket but didn't pull it out. I wanted to hear how far he would take the lie. "I was asking," I said quietly. He looked up, offering a thin smile. "You're worrying too much, Mariah. You should trust your husband." That smile sent a chill down my spine. Those scattered pieces, every lie, every disappearance, were forming a picture that terrified me. My instincts told me there was a huge secret lying right inside my home. I didn't yet know exactly what it was, but if I didn't find the truth, I would be buried alive in this marriage. When Ethan said he was meeting a client in Aurora, I stayed home alone. The house was spacious but so cold that every tick of the clock seemed to echo in my head. I walked into his private office, the room he rarely let me enter. On the desk, everything was still unnaturally tidy. Stacks of blank paper, neatly arranged pens, a laptop locked tight. I was about to leave when my eyes caught the trash can by the desk. Among the shredded scraps, I saw a folded receipt. I gently pulled it out, my heart pounding when I realized it was a receipt from a flower shop in Las Vegas. The printed line read, 1 dozen red roses, $85. The purchase date was 3 weeks ago, the same time Ethan said he was attending a conference in Salt Lake City. My hands shook as I turned it over. There was a phone number written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. I sank into a chair, feeling like I had touched a piece of undeniable evidence. I couldn't help myself. I took out my phone and dialed the number. The ring sounded a few times before someone picked up. A woman's voice came through, gentle but hurried. "Hello?" I froze, unsure what to say. In that moment of hesitation, I clearly heard her exclaim, "I miss you too, baby." I hung up quickly, my heart racing. The room spun around me. That voice couldn't be a mistake. It was too intimate. Ethan was lying to me, and not lying but betraying me. From that day on, I started tracking his every move. Each morning he left the house in a crisp suit, carrying his briefcase like a diligent employee. But when I quietly tailed him by car, he never went to the central financial district of Denver, where the headquarters of the company he worked for was located. Instead, he stopped at a cafe near a shopping center, sat for hours, typed on a laptop, then walked out and tossed a few papers into the trash. I tried calling the main line of the company he claimed. The security guard's voice was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, there's no one named Ethan Caldwell here. I've worked here for 5 years and have never heard that name." The phone slipped from my hand and hit the kitchen floor with a dull thud. I stood frozen, my hand clenched until it went numb. My husband didn't work where he said he did. The entire financial consulting story was smoke and mirrors. I knew I had to go further. One evening, while Ethan was in the shower, I saw his phone on the nightstand. My heart tore in two. But the suspicion had grown too big to ignore. I took a deep breath and entered the passcode. It was our wedding date. The screen opened. The message list appeared and I went numb. A string of texts with the name Amanda Wilson. Lines dripping with intimacy. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Love you forever. I'm counting the days, baby." I scrolled down. Each message felt like a knife cutting into my heart. Then I came across a photo. I dropped the phone in shock, but my trembling hands picked it back up. On the screen was Ethan in a suit, his arm around an unfamiliar woman. Both of them were smiling brightly in front of a familiar building, the Las Vegas courthouse. And on their hands, wedding rings. My vision blurred. He had married this woman. It wasn't an affair. It was another marriage running parallel to mine. The sound of water from the shower kept flowing steadily. I hurriedly transferred all the photos and messages to my own phone. My hands shook so badly I had to press several times before it went through. My shoulders felt weighed down with stone, my heartbeat pounding like hammers in my chest. When Ethan walked out wrapped in a towel, he was whistling and grinning to himself. For the first time I saw him truly cheerful. But now I understood why. His joy wasn't for me. It was for her. I forced myself to sound normal. "What do you want for dinner?" He looked at me with surprise, then gave a light laugh. "Anything's fine. You decide." If he discovered I knew the truth, I was certain I would be in danger. So I buried everything deep inside, pretending to read a magazine while the evidence that could destroy his entire fabricated life sat in my phone. That night, I lay beside the man I called my husband, listening to his steady breathing while my chest ached. I thought of the day we got engaged, when he knelt before my family, slipped a ring on my finger and said, "You're the one I've been looking for all my life." Now all those memories replayed like a cheap play. On the nightstand my phone lit up. I opened it, looking again at the saved photos. In one, Amanda wore a simple white dress, holding red roses. Ethan looked at her as if she were his whole world. Meanwhile, on my own wedding day, all I saw in his eyes was detachment and coldness. "Who are you, Ethan? Who are you really?" The ticking clock drilled into my chest with every beat. The next morning, when Ethan left the house, I sat in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee I couldn't even sip. I thought of my parents, of my sister Claire. If I told them, would they believe me? Or would they think I was imagining things? I knew I needed more proof. The flower receipt, the woman's voice on the phone, the wedding photos in Las Vegas. They were damning, but to expose a double life like Ethan's, I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. I turned to a name Claire once mentioned. Patricia Harris, a well-known divorce lawyer in Denver specializing in complicated cases involving property and fraud. Her office was on the 12th floor of a glass building overlooking the Rocky Mountains. I still remember how my palms were drenched in sweat when I rang the bell. Patricia was a woman in her 50s, her graying hair neatly pinned, her eyes sharp, her voice warm yet firm. After I explained everything, she paused for a long moment, her eyes fixed on me. Then slid her glasses down her nose and looked me in the eye. "Mariah, what you've brought me isn't simple infidelity. This could be bigamy. In Colorado, that's a felony. He could face years in prison." I stammered. "You mean, my marriage isn't valid? If Ethan legally married that other woman before marrying you, then your marriage to him is void. But it doesn't end there. With the evidence suggesting he targeted your inheritance, I suspect this may also be a deliberate financial fraud scheme." I buried my face in my hands, my voice shaking. "I signed the prenup he wrote. I trusted him. If it was all a scam, I'll lose everything." Patricia placed her hand gently on the desk, speaking slowly. "Not necessarily. If we prove the contract was signed under fraudulent conditions, it can be voided. But to do that, you'll need more than photos and receipts. You need hard evidence gathered by an expert." She handed me a business card. On it was written, "Michael Torres, private investigator." He used to be a homicide detective. Now he specializes in marital fraud cases. If Ethan truly is a marriage predator, Torres will uncover his real face. 2 days later, I walked into Torres's modest office in an old neighborhood. The walls were lined with files and maps, the desk stacked with thick folders. Torres was a middle-aged man with silver hair, his eyes sharp as blades. After hearing my story, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I've seen plenty of cases like this. The pattern's the same. A con artist targets a woman with assets, pretends to be romantic, rushes into marriage, then schemes to take everything. Once he succeeds, he disappears." I bit my lip, tears welling. But when we were dating, he was perfect. He knew every little detail about me. He gave me a book I loved back in college, took me to the cafe where I used to work. How could a con artist be that meticulous? Torres tilted his head, sympathy flickering in his eyes. "That's exactly what makes him dangerous. These men study their targets carefully, like hunters tracking prey. They dig through social media, friends, even public records. They become the exact kind of man you're longing for." My voice trembled. "So what do I do now?" He opened a drawer, pulled out a small recorder and set it in front of me. "Colorado is a one-party consent state. That means you can record any conversation with Ethan without his knowledge. If he slips up, we'll have key evidence." I picked up the recorder, feeling it far heavier than its size. Torres continued, "I'll also run a full background check. Marriage records across states, financial tracking, and digging into Amanda Wilson. If she's truly his legal wife, the whole facade will collapse. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm ready. I need the truth, no matter how painful. Torres gave me a steady look. But prepare yourself. What we find could be worse than you imagine. Are you sure you want to see this through? I have no way back. That evening, sitting across from Ethan at dinner, I hid the recorder in my dress pocket. He spooned pasta and casually asked, "How was your day?" My voice trembled, but I forced it to sound natural. "Just fine. I stopped by Claire's, she says hello." He smirked faintly, then quickly shifted to talking about economic news. I tried to read his expression, but all I saw was a mask. Every word he spoke now felt like theater. After dinner, he got a call, hurried into his office, and shut the door. I gripped the recorder, my heartbeat racing. I knew patience was key. Eventually, he would expose himself. That night, I called Claire and told her about meeting the lawyer and investigator. On the other end, she said, "Mariah, I'm sorry I didn't smile like everyone else on your wedding day. I always felt something about Ethan was off. But I never thought it was this serious." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You're stronger than you think," Claire whispered. "But be careful. If he realizes you're suspicious, things could get dangerous." I clenched the phone, glancing at the office door where Ethan was still murmuring into the phone. A chill ran down my spine at the thought that I was living under the same roof with the very man I once called my husband. That evening, after Ethan once again used the excuse of a client's urgent call and left the house, I decided to call my sister Claire Bennett. Her voice trembled slightly when she heard me choke out, "Claire, I can't hold it in anymore. Something terrible has happened." "What did Ethan do to you this time?" I told her about the flower receipt in Las Vegas, about the strange woman's voice on the phone, and about the wedding photos I had found. The moment I finished, I heard sobbing on the other end. I knew it. Claire burst into tears. "I felt something was wrong from the very beginning. I didn't listen to you. I thought you were being too harsh. Now I understand. Don't blame yourself, Mariah. It's not your fault for believing in love. But now it's different. You have to protect yourself." Her words gave me strength. But I knew a harder battle awaited me, facing my parents. The next evening, I went to my parents' house in South Denver. My mother was preparing dinner, the smell of roast chicken filling the air, while my father sat in his armchair reading the paper. They smiled at me warmly, unaware of the storm about to break. I twisting my hands together. "I need to talk." "About Ethan." My father set the paper down, frowning. "What now? You two just got married. It's normal to have small issues while adjusting." My mother quickly cut in, her voice anxious. "Mariah, don't be too sensitive. Ethan is a good man. Everyone says so. Marriage requires patience, sweetheart." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photo of Ethan and Amanda standing in front of the Las Vegas courthouse. My voice trembled. "This is proof. He married another woman." My mother raised her hand to her mouth, eyes wide. "No? Impossible." My father stared at the screen, his face turning red. "This could be fake. It's easy to edit pictures these days. Don't let yourself get carried away." Choked, I pulled out the flower receipt from my purse and set it on the table. "I'm not making this up. This is from Las Vegas, the day Ethan claimed he was at a Salt Lake City conference." And I heard her voice myself. My mother sank into a chair, mumbling, "Oh God. But how?" My father shook his head, his voice firm. "I don't believe it. Ethan is educated, respectful. Everyone can see how much he loves you." I bit my lip as tears fell. "Dad, Mom, why won't you believe me? I'm your daughter. Why does my word matter less than Ethan's polished image in front of others?" My mother wept, clutching my hand. "It's not that I don't believe you. I just can't bear to believe this is real." My father turned away, avoiding my eyes. That silence hurt more than denial itself. When I returned home, I felt torn in two. Claire believed me, but my parents didn't. They would rather protect the illusion of a perfect son-in-law than face the brutal truth. The following days, the pressure grew heavier. My father called, his tone stern. "Mariah, I want you to stop doubting Ethan right now. Marriage requires patience. Making a scene only brings shame to the family. So I should just keep my mouth shut and let a fraud ruin everything I have?" He snapped. "Don't use the word con artist about your husband. I won't accept it." I hung up, realizing that in his eyes, Ethan had become the golden standard while I, his daughter, was branded the troublemaker. One afternoon, Claire came to my house. She hugged me tightly as if trying to pour all her strength into me. "Don't let Mom and Dad shake you," Claire said firmly. "They fear the truth more than they care about you. But I'm here. You're not alone." I buried my face in her shoulder, sobbing. In her arms, I felt a flicker of safety. Claire looked straight at me, her eyes blazing. "You've already started, Mariah. You saw the lawyer, you hired the investigator. Don't stop just because our parents don't believe you. Do what you know is right." The weight of my family's doubt nearly crushed me. But their disbelief and criticism hardened into fuel. I remembered every moment Ethan avoided me, every lie, every photo of him grinning beside another woman. I knew I couldn't stop at heartbreak. I had to push forward all the way to the truth. The small recorder Detective Torres gave me became inseparable from me. I kept it hidden in my pocket or near the dining table, waiting for Ethan to slip. At first, it captured only vague chatter, flimsy schedules, evasive words. I grew discouraged, even questioning if I was being paranoid. But that night, the truth cut through like a blade. After dinner, Ethan took a call. He stepped into his office and shut the door. I had grown used to this, but this time I slipped the recorder into the pocket of his coat hanging near the door. Close enough to capture, far enough to avoid suspicion. My heart racing, struggling to keep my breathing steady. Ethan's voice came through, clear and brimming with excitement. "She's signing the divorce soon. Once it's official, I get her grandmother's trust fund." I froze. He was talking about me. On the other end was that familiar woman's voice, sweet yet chilling. "I told you this plan would work." Ethan laughed, a laugh I had never heard. "The prenup she signed is the real trick. If we divorce within a year, she gets nothing. But I get rights to half of the assets brought into the marriage. And you know that trust fund is enough for us to disappear again." I dropped onto the sofa, my body trembling under the truth. He had planned every step. The love, the promises, the grand wedding, all leading to this moment. Amanda's voice spoke again, softer but clear. "Just be careful, Ethan. Don't let her suspect." Ethan chuckled, whispering, "Don't worry, Amanda. She's naive enough." The name stabbed me like a blade. The woman in the wedding photo. I thought she was Ethan's secret wife. But her next words stopped my blood cold. "We've done this so many times," Amanda said, her laugh low. "I play the wife, you play the husband. Who would ever guess we're siblings?" I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a cry. They were siblings? Pretending to be husband and wife to scam women like me? Ethan's voice carried on, calm as if discussing daily business. "That's exactly why it works. You play the wife at home, I go find the next target. The money all flows to the same place." Amanda giggled. "She seems weak. But smart too. I worry she'll suspect." "Relax," Ethan replied. "She thinks she's the center of my life. And if she doubts, her family will shut it down. You know her parents adore me more than their own daughter." I bit my lip until it bled. He was right. My parents hadn't believed me. They trusted Ethan's polished facade more than their own child. I quickly turned off the recorder when I heard the office door open. Ethan stepped out, his face glowing with that false joy. "You're still up?" he asked lightly. I turned away, hiding my swollen eyes. "I'm reading." He kissed my forehead like a rehearsed gesture, then went upstairs. I sat frozen, clutching the recorder in my pocket. Inside it was the brutal truth, the undeniable proof of who Ethan and Amanda really were. The next morning, I went to see Detective Torres. His office was dim, the smell of strong coffee hanging in the air. I set the recorder on his desk, my voice hoarse. "You have to hear this." Torres pressed play, listening intently. When Amanda's voice came through, he snapped his head up, eyes filled with shock and disgust. "By God," he muttered. "They're siblings. And they've turned that into a weapon for crime." I lowered my head, my voice breaking. "I can't believe it. The man I called my husband staged this sick charade with his own sister." Torres gripped his notebook, his eyes hardening. "Mariah, you're no longer the victim. This is solid gold evidence. With this recording, along with the receipts and wedding photos, we can bring everything to light. But my parents, what will they do when they learn the truth? The truth can wound, but hiding from it leaves scars that never heal. You've stepped into this fight and now you have the strongest weapon. That evening, I went back home and sat across from Ethan in the living room. He smiled, asking casually, "Where did you go today?" "I went to see my sister." "Good. Family's important." In that moment, I wanted to leap up and throw the vile truth from the recorder in his face. But I held back. It wasn't time yet. The day Patricia, my lawyer, laid the draft divorce papers on the table, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the pen tightly to keep from dropping it. She looked at me over her glasses, speaking slowly. "Mariah, from this moment you have to play a role. You're no longer the strong woman collecting evidence. You're the broken wife, desperate to let go. Ethan has to believe that or the plan will collapse." Inside me, pain and contempt for Ethan swirled like a storm, but I forced myself to bury it. I had to make him think I was defeated, ready to leave this marriage in despair. That evening, when Ethan came home, I was waiting in the living room. On the table was an envelope. He walked in, shrugging off his coat, and asked, "How long have you been sitting here?" I made sure my eyes were red, my voice trembling. "Ethan, I can't take this anymore. These are divorce papers. I'll file them tomorrow." He froze, blinking rapidly as if to hide his shock, then dropped into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "Mariah, I never thought it would come to this." I bowed my head, my shoulders shaking under the weight of it all. But inside, I watched every twitch of his face. And what I saw wasn't pain, it was relief. "Maybe," he continued, his tone half regretful, half detached, "maybe that's best for both of us." I bit my lip, choking out, "I just want it to end." He nodded, clenching his hands but with the corners of his mouth lifting slightly, as though a burden had been lifted. I knew then he believed me. The next day, Patricia and I went to the Denver County Courthouse to officially file. In the documents, the reasons were written in simple words: irreconcilable differences, emotional distance, inability to repair. I walked out of the courthouse clutching the papers like they were my pain itself. But in truth, it was the trap now set. Patricia leaned close, whispering, "Now we wait for him to act. Torres and the FBI are ready." 2 days later, Torres called me, his voice urgent but steady. "Mariah, he's taken the bait. Tomorrow morning, Ethan and Amanda are meeting at First National Bank downtown. He's bringing fake documents to withdraw the entire trust fund." I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. The day had finally come. The next morning, I sat in a car with Torres not far from the bank. From the back seat, he handed me a headset connected to the FBI team lying in wait. A special agent's voice came through. "Targets approaching." The pair entered through the main doors. I looked through the windshield and saw Ethan in a gray suit, briefcase in hand, Amanda beside him with her blonde hair tied back, dressed in a simple business outfit. To anyone else, they looked like an ordinary couple handling bank business. But I knew beneath that facade was crime. Torres put a steady hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm. Everything's being recorded." Inside the bank, surveillance cameras showed Ethan handing over a file to the teller, smiling politely. Amanda sat waiting, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I heard an agent's voice clearly through the headset. "He's presenting forged documents. Verification in progress." A tense silence. Then the agent's voice again. "Green light. Move in." At once, plainclothes FBI agents swarmed. "Ethan Caldwell, you're under arrest for financial fraud, forgery, and bigamy." Amanda barely had time to react before handcuffs clicked on her wrists. Ethan spun around, pale, stammering, "No, you're mistaken. This is my legal account." But the agent's cold voice cut through. "All evidence is complete. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can and will be used against you in court." The man who once vowed to protect me for life was dragged away in handcuffs. That evening, I sat in Patricia's office with Torres and 2 FBI agents. They laid thick files before me. Copies of the forged documents, the recordings, and surveillance images. The lead agent spoke. Bennett, thanks to your cooperation and evidence, we caught them in the act. And it wasn't you. We've identified at least 3 other victims in different states." Torres added with a bitter edge. They'd been running an entire fraud ring. But this time, they didn't expect a woman brave enough to stand up. I looked down at the table, gripping my water glass. Inside, I still carried an ache. But amid the wreckage, a faint fire burned. Justice was finally closing in. That night back home, I sank into the dark living room. On the table, the small recorder rested in stillness. I touched it, remembering Ethan's confident words. He thought he was clever, that I would crumble easily. But in the end, those very words shackled him in chains. I leaned back, closing my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I drew a deep breath without feeling suffocated. I knew the road ahead held more pain. Trials, public scrutiny, my parents' reaction. But at least the man who deceived me was no longer free. 2 months after the FBI raid, I found myself in a federal courtroom in Denver. The vast hall, the high ceiling, the cold light made the place feel both solemn and suffocating. From my seat in the gallery, I stared at the long table where the prosecutor's thick files were spread out. The iron door opened and guards led Ethan and Amanda in. Both wore orange prison uniforms, their hands cuffed. Seeing them nearly stole my breath. The man who once vowed to shield me now walked hunched, gaunt, head lowered. Amanda, the woman who had once beamed in that wedding photo, looked shattered, her eyes red, her hair disheveled. The prosecutor rose, his voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, the defendants Ethan Caldwell and Amanda Caldwell are charged with multiple counts: bigamy, financial fraud, identity forgery, conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud. The words echoed through the courtroom. I listened to each one. Everything Torres and I had gathered, every recording, every receipt, every image, was now a blade aimed directly at them. Ethan's lawyer stood, his voice trembling. Your Honor, my client insists he is innocent. His actions stemmed from love and have been misunderstood. But the prosecutor cut him short. He pressed play on the recorder, Ethan's voice booming through the courtroom. She's signing the divorce soon. Once it's official, I get her grandmother's trust fund. A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. I saw my parents in the back row, my mother clutching my father's hand, their faces pale. Claire stared straight at the bench, her grip tightening around mine. The prosecutor continued. Furthermore, we have proof the defendants are siblings, yet posed as husband and wife to conduct multiple fraud schemes across at least 5 states. The total stolen amount approaches $3 million. The murmurs rose again, heavy and disgusted. I looked at Ethan. For the first time he lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine. They were no longer arrogant but desperate, as if begging me to save him. I turned away. Amanda burst into tears, her sobs echoing through the room. She tried to say something, but the guard held her down, not letting her stand. The judge, an older man with silver hair, struck his gavel, his voice stern. Order. The trial dragged on for days. Other victims came forward one after another. A middle-aged woman from Texas tearfully testified that she lost nearly $500,000 because she believed Ethan was her husband. A young woman from Arizona choked up as she said Ethan had promised to marry her after divorcing Amanda, only to vanish with all her savings. I listened to every word, feeling both grief and rage. I wasn't the only victim. I was just one link in a carefully crafted chain of deceit. Then it was my turn to testify. I stepped up to the stand, my legs trembling but my eyes steady. The prosecutor asked, Ms. Bennett, can you tell us what you experienced in your marriage to the defendant Ethan Caldwell? 6 weeks after the wedding, I was living with a complete stranger. He avoided me, said that his body was his own, and used the excuse of boundaries to hide the truth. I believed in love, but it was all a performance. He married me to steal my grandmother's trust fund. My voice faltered, but I pressed on. I trusted him with everything. And in return, I received betrayal, humiliation, and a calculated scheme. I clearly heard my mother's heavy sigh from the back row. Finally, sentencing day arrived. The judge rose, his voice deep and commanding. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court sentences the defendant Ethan Caldwell to 15 years in federal prison and Amanda Caldwell to 10 years. The gavel struck like thunder. I closed my eyes, feeling a massive weight fall from my chest. My parents broke into tears. My father turned and gripped my hand tightly, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, Mariah. I didn't believe you. The media immediately picked up the story. Headlines flashed across newspapers and television. Colorado's most dangerous marriage predator brought down. Ethan's face appeared on screen, his eyes vacant, next to Amanda's, her head bowed in tears. Their identities exposed, their criminal empire shattered. That night I returned to my home. The house that once echoed with cold silence was still, but this time the stillness felt peaceful. On the kitchen table, I set down a cup of hot tea and gazed out the window. Snow drifted gently, covering the garden in white. Claire walked in carrying a basket of freshly baked apple pies. She sat beside me, squeezing my hand softly. "It's finally over, Mariah." Inside me the pain lingered, but mixed with it was relief. Ethan had paid the price. So had Amanda. And me, I hadn't survived. I had stood up and I had been vindicated before the law. A few days later, the FBI announced that nearly $3 million had been recovered from accounts Ethan and Amanda had stolen. The funds were returned to the victims. I didn't care much about the money. What comforted me was that the truth had come to light, and women like me were finally protected by justice. That evening, I sat in Claire's small kitchen. The old oak table was covered with a blue-patterned cloth. On it sat my mother's roast chicken, the warm apple pies, and a bottle of red wine Claire had bought to celebrate the victory. No fireworks, no loud music, but I had never felt such a warm dinner. My closest friends were there too. They had seen me in my white wedding dress, held me as I cried when I confessed my marriage was collapsing, and now they were here again, raising glasses because I had emerged from the darkness. Claire poured me wine, her eyes glistening in the golden light. "You know, Mariah, today I am truly proud of you." I smiled softly, squeezing her hand. "Without you, I would have collapsed long ago." One friend looked at me, her voice emotional. "You proved that revenge isn't just watching him go to prison. You protected other women, women who might have fallen into his trap if you had stayed silent." Yes, the greatest comfort wasn't seeing Ethan and Amanda in handcuffs. It was knowing their scam had ended. No one else would suffer as I had. When night fell and everyone left, I stood on the porch with Claire. The Denver autumn was chilly, the wind rustling through the maple trees. Claire draped a coat over my shoulders, her voice gentle. "You've come a long way. Now let yourself rest, Mariah." You know, at first I thought the only goal was to make him pay. But the further I went, the more I realized, the greatest revenge is reclaiming my life. Claire smiled, wrapping her arm around me. "And you did." One morning I went to the park near my home. Mist still hung in the air. I sat on a bench, listening to children running and laughing all around. I closed my eyes, breathing in a peace I hadn't felt in so long. And that was the journey I had walked. From a bride who thought she was stepping into a fairy tale, to a woman who faced betrayal and a cruel scam. But I had risen not only to protect myself but to stop people like Ethan and Amanda from hurting anyone else. I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you stay silent to protect the image of a perfect family? Or would you stand up, reveal the truth, knowing storms would come? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every experience, every perspective can become strength for women facing the same battles. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Because here we'll continue to share real stories about family, love, and the brave choices that help us find ourselves again. I'll see you in the next story.